Hello everybody, I'm here today with Tony Blake for our, I don't know if it's our fourth, fifth or sixth podcast, but we're going to today hopefully discuss Zoroastrianism, which is, and see where it takes us from there, which is one of my favourite religions because I'm very into this good versus evil, which Zoroastrian was mainly about, that there's the dark side and the light side. So Tony, over to you. What would you like to say about Zoroastrianism and I hope Zarathustra, Ahura Mazda and Ahriman?
Ahriman, wicked Ahriman. I'll give us sort of from this. There's first of all to say that it is not at all cut and dried and simple what was the Zoroastrian system, and it did go through many changes over time. And there is not even agreement on when Zoroaster lived. Some say he lived, well, remember 1,000 years BC, and others he lived 600 years BC. There are many arguments about his birth, and also many arguments about the theology, if you like, the system. Interestingly enough, there is a strand of scholarship which has looked deeply into the gathas as the hymns of the Zoroastrians, and really are quite sure these were composed by Zoroaster himself, and they have analyzed them to see that in the composition of these hymns there was embodied certain knowledge to do with the kind of teaching that Zoroaster brought, and it was related to thing we can't go into it at this time very much. What interests me, that method of course of ring composition, where about a hymn or a story could have a hidden, not a hidden but an inner structure in which more subtle ideas could be presented.
So having more than one meaning?
Well, yes, well, not in the simple sense of being open to interpretation, there is that, but it can be very strictly aligned. I'm just thinking example, and I spoke to you about my old friend Simon Wakeman just over the way here in University of London years back, and he was into this ring composition, and he made the study of Rumi's Masnavi, book 1, called Rumi's Mystical Design, and it was a beautiful, for me, very beautiful presentation he derived from this, because first of all, I think one can easily visualize what I'm going to say. You get a book, a narrative, and you just put the elements in it in a circle, and then you can see there is a kind of like it's like two halves. In some ways these, to me, symbolically even represent, a lot of people disagree with me, the two sides of the brain and so on. And this is, as people have, well, now I'm going to go off into Ted Hughes and his ideas on Shakespeare, but let's come back from that. And so there is, in this division, and interestingly enough it is reflected in things like the Enneagram, between the left and the right sides, so that the left is more inward and the right more outward, and also the right part of the cycle is going outward from the source, and the left side is coming back to the source, returning, so it's involution, evolution, all these kinds of associations, which are absolutely remarkable and beautiful. So you get, and Simon Wakeman in his book on Rumi says that you get, what you get in the first book are 6 stories, and they're repeated, but they're repeated in reverse order. The first set of stories presents these things about the goldsmith and the princess and the king and all these sorts of events and that from the point of view of man, of our human intelligence. On the left-hand side, the same stories in reverse from the point of view of God.
So from a divine purpose?
Pardon?
From a divine purpose.
Yes, yeah, the divine perspective, so to speak. But he then said, what's in the middle? That's where these, you have picture a circle and then some lines crossing, inside the circle, just a simple picture, whatever comes to you. And he said, and then it produces the central axis. I'm going to say, what is that? He said, that is the perspective of the seeker. It's beautiful,
yes,
isn't it?
It is.
The outer and the divine, but the seekers middle is what Bennett calls the psychokinetic. Often you get very confused into which interpretation is true. So anyway, there's all of that.
So it's like the bridge between...
Yes.
And only the true seekers will go along that bridge, and those that aren't interested in seeking will stay on the man's side.
Oh, now you're releasing all kinds of thoughts in my mind, because you get the sense, and it's hinted at in that another marvelous man, Hubert Benoit. I don't know if you read his books on Zen and so on. He's an incredible man. But he talks about this central axis, which is that middle part in him, which is the human thing, which goes, in a way, transcends the divine and the mundane. Because there's part of a tradition which says that the seeking, the really truly human side, is something where we can get the reality directly, not through, it doesn't require either our outer knowledge or grace, but something just truly directly in ourselves. And that's a beautiful part of tradition that you can start to catch on. Is the direct path reflected in Hinduism by Inda and Bengali, the two nerve impulses which go outside. And there's also the Shushuma, which is the central axis. It's all in there. You see, it's all pointing to the same thing. Anyway, we're getting far away from Zoroaster. But this is going to be like that in this talk. Let's wander. Because everything's connected to everything else, but some things are more connected than others, and some things are connected today but not tomorrow. And it depends who you're talking to.
Exactly, yes.
But Zoroaster is important because he is taken to be, in a way, well, in general, and a lot of these, roughly in general, I can't be precise about it because I don't know, was a kind of pioneer of religions. He's like a forerunner of all the other of the monotheistic, Abrahamic religions. And what is it about? Because in him you have this absolute strong emphasis on free will and choice. Yeah. And so his portrayal of the universe and so on was very much an ethical one, which you do find reflected some comments of Gurdjieff, "May angel and devil go with you," and all his "I trust devil," and so on, which is his take on it. And the idea of these two characters on
your shoulders, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, on your shoulders, that's right. And also the absolute importance for our realization of temptation. We can't get nowhere without temptation. I mean, if you can look at it sort of cynically and say, oh, it would be a doddle, we could just go for it, What's the problem? It would be interesting, would it? There's something in the central axis, whatever it is, but there's got to be, Bennett said, dramatic, something interesting. So there is real choice. There is a real choice. But then what sets the stage for it? So I call it setting the stage, because I'm so much into theatre these days. He's got to portray this cosmic drama. And so, going back to mention again, there is no clear picture of the theology in Iran, as now it was the time Persia, where Zoroaster was born and worked, and from which came the Magi, who came to see Jesus. For example, they came from Persia, from the Zoroastrian tradition, because we were smart people. And so a really good hap is that it has, well, it's like 4 characters, but I mentioned 3 of them, and mysterious character or role was a Zovan, which means infinite time, sometimes infinite time, and have various shades of meaning. And the scholars differ. They say, some people say that it was the original kind of idea Zoroaster had, or before Zoroaster, and others say it evolved later, because Zoroaster himself was strongly associated with this polarity, this duality between, as you say, good and evil. And the bad, so to speak, were represented by Ahriman, and the good by Ahura Mazda.
Not the car.
Pardon?
Not the car.
What is car sighting?
Not the car, because they named a car after Ahura Mazda.
Oh, I see. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry,
Which I always thought was quite amazing.
Oh.
Or, you know.
Well, it does come up, and there's other references you find it in commercial products, and it's very interesting. But anyway, there is this conflict, and so came later the explanation. So Van gave birth to the twins. Now, this notion of the twins is actually fundamental in all ancient cosmologies, and it's like even down to Rome and Romulus and Remus and so on. And like one kills the other eventually, and this kind of thing. It's so endemic in it, and it has to do with I say it has to do with my take on it. It's an abstract one. It has to do with this inherent nature of duality in our nature. To do with the sexes, but also everything we look at becomes dual, and it has many, many subtleties to it.
Like having the devil and the angel on our shoulders is a duality. It's a good side telling us to do one thing, a bad side tempting us to do another.
Yeah. Well, looking ahead, Gurdjieff denounced, this pernicious doctrine of the good and evil. And so he actually sets his cap against that, which in a sense could say would start with Zoroaster. And it's still now infecting America with his obsession with goodies and baddies, and the man in the white hat, the man in the black hat. But gives rise to these, and you see in a sense, well, what's the point of this? Why is it arising? Because they said, well, it's a Bennett sort of thing. I go back to Bennett's reference, just the concept, the words, the dramatic universe. It makes it dramatic because there is what makes drama interesting, because you've got goodies and baddies, or for the
love and hate and
all of that.
Like that, yes.
If there isn't some kind of conflict in the drama, it's not interesting. And if everybody was nice, you wouldn't get people paying to go and see it. But of course, the essence of all this is really simply it would come out totally abstract. Is that you've got some principle which makes a difference, which introduces difference. Now, whenever you find difference in the world, in our common world, you find it associated with judgmental things like, you say there's a difference between men and women, so one of them gets treated as inferior. Everywhere where you get a difference, one of them is treated as lesser than the other. Always. And so this is a great problem in human thinking, really great problem. You can't, and so I'm not saying so, but I'm now throwing in here other elements from science and from Bennett and so on, science, particularly Niels Bohr, who was the principle of complementarity. These, like the wave and the particle, they're very different, but they're not kind of opposed to each other. But there's this difference between them, which has to be realized, and so that one is not complete without the other. And so that is a very important notion, which is, I don't know where it got to in the Zoroastrian scheme, but it was obviously, well, not obviously so much, but it is evidently something to be regarded, is that you can't have one without the other, this kind of thing.
Because aren't we striving to get a balance then?
Well,
is that the ultimate goal, to be balanced between the two, so that neither affects you, or you can understand both sides?
I understand both sides, but it's now again all these subtleties about the principle here. But let me try and say this: that it's sort of you can't have one without the other. You see, this is that's a major act of understanding, and it takes you free of this. They say the judgment: this is bad and that's good. This is higher and that's lower. This is dark and that's light. The kind of infamous projection on women, which happens throughout all traditions and cultures, right? About this with differentiation. So a lot of women today don't want to say, well, we got a different brain from men because we would then be judged as inferior, because the difference means not that. So and the only other room for not that is inferior. Whereas in the kind of creative realm, it's the opposite. It's the beginning of something new.
Yes.
And so the conflict is there, you see, and in a way Bennett used to call it, say, what this does, this duality does, its main function is to provoke energy. But then you enter the realm of will and your own act, because there's not just these two principles, so to speak, acting outside of yourself on you, but you take a role, you see, and you're part of the process, and the whole game changes, you know.
Becomes magical.
Magical, absolutely. Now, we're going to rush through all sorts of things. One thing I want to throw in at the beginning here about this conflict, right? And there's one period where they had the idea of Zavan decreed that Ahriman would be triumphant for 6,000 years. And where they got to, why that number was very strange. And then, because it had to be equal-handed to the two of them. So that's a very strange thought, you know. Then, the other thing was that to do a cunning on the part of Ahura Mazda, which is to do with, well, you see, as, so to speak, just those two principles, the issue could never be resolved. Bounce, you know, after one comes forth the two, forever and forever. Well, it's Ahura with him, so he made the creation. Now, the nature of creation is such that it is finite. And he enticed Ahriman into the creation to work out their antagonism, which meant that whatever Ahriman would do, it was still finite, would not be there for eternity. So it enabled incredible possibilities. You see it cascading out of this, you know. That this whole world around is a stage which is here at this period of Zoroastrian teaching, so that Ahriman could be defeated. That's quite something.
So is that saying that Ahriman is ruling the right word? Ruling this world? Or?
Well, in that version, yes, in that particular version. But just remind ourselves all the times you have different periods, different people, different times, different versions. With all these different versions are around, just a kind of combinatorial effort about making sense of the parameters they start with. You see, they just clash into various versions, and there isn't one doctrine which forever is consistent. And it's amongst intelligent people of our own epoch, and I was talking to some friends of mine about this yesterday, we noticed that there isn't any total system where everything is in place. It just keeps on spewing different variations all the time, you know, but the old expectation was we could sort it all out, you know, like Ouspensky searching for the system. Gurdjieff was too untidy, he was messing up, he got involved in religion, we don't want that, we want the system. But where everything's in its place, and there isn't any such thing. And in a way, if Ouspensky had really assimilated some of modern mathematics, he would have understood this, you know, because we're in the realm of undecidability and incompleteness. Anyway.
So in a way, Ouspensky wanted it to be very black and white, but it's not. Everything's shades of grey, really.
Yes, more than that. In a way, it's impossible for everything to find its place at all. It's not black, it just you can't.
Because if you can put it into order, then you can have control over it, can't you? Yeah. And everything's
absolutely
set. But when something goes wrong, then it's a shock because you're thinking that's not followed the plan.
That's right. That's Gurdjieff often emphasised that in a famous passage, and you know, when things turn out not as they expected, then you have a moment when you can realise that your role and your intelligence. You can't realise it before if you've got this order. And of course, if you have an order, then you say, "Why, but let's identify with this," and you become a fascist and start bullying other people and telling them what to do and telling them what's right and all that kind of nonsense. It's a very deep disease. So anyway, we don't get it, so I can't swear it, there's any one system, the Zoroastrian, but he introduced this element of, the human is then faced with this choice between the forces. And Steiner took this in his own way, with his incredible portrayal of Ahriman against Lucifer, with the Christ as the third force in it, in his famous sculpture in the Gurdjieffum.
This is Rudolf Steiner, just for those that have never heard of him. Yep.
That's right, who broke away from theosophy and founded anthroposophy. But also a very creative man in the realm of education and agriculture and movement and his eurythmy. But anyway, he had Ahriman was in him is the character who is like the old caricature of the scientist, is cold-blooded in a white coat, who vivisects and Lucifer is the caricature of the artist, completely just obsessed with their own passions and emotions. Mm-hmm. And it's a very useful image to present to people about these two clashing in us and how Christ is beyond this. Yeah. Because you see pictures of this statue, and Christ is no mamby-pamby, but he's a very strong character. Well, that's in the background. That's to do with the Law 3 we might get to a bit later. But going back to Zoroastrianism, did many things about the choice. It's up to us, and it was conscience, and began to become possible in all of that, and even how it developed in the Greeks. Socrates, this idea of the individual conscience and choice and so on, became then in religions, and Buddha, work out your own salvation with diligence, and so the human individual became more portrayed. But it appears that Zoroaster anticipated all of this, and he developed the context for things like angels, and he had a Vahu Manu, the good mind, and this. So it's like changing from the old systems of the gods into these elements which became things like the angels and the guardians and all this kind of thing. So he was an extraordinary fellow in many respects. And
so it was no longer the gods directing us, we have to direct ourselves.
Absolutely, yeah. The matter of pulling on us is up to us how we respond. Which amazing innovation, yeah. And really, really interesting, because by that time in Homer and so on, portrayed of people, they were just puppets in a sense in the hands of the gods, and there was no choice in doing it. There was a hint in Homer in that character of Odysseus, why? Because he would go apart and sit quietly, and people didn't know what he was doing, but in modern parlance, he was thinking. People didn't really do it in those days at all.
Because you just did things.
You did things. It's only, I'll kill you, I'll rape you. Everything was like that. So that thing. Now we come back to Gurdjieff, and I said to you earlier before we started this, got very more puzzled by his quite complicated description of things, and so he starts off with kind of 3 elements mainly, and he adds them later. But I mentioned first of all, he talks about the merciless Europass, which obviously is time, and is this taken in some way from the van. And, the jury's out on that, but in some ways it echoes standard physics, thermodynamics. Everything wears out. There is an increase in disorder. And what is disorder? It means the diminution of potentials. Now this is how he describes then poor Mr. God in his dwelling, seeing his dwelling was diminishing. Which, to treat the dwelling as potential. And it's diminishing through the action of time, and this is then looking at it like standard thermodynamics. You see? Now, it is a little bit like Zovan, but who is Ahura Mazda, maybe like his endlessness, who was always portrayed as the jolly good chap.
Yes, the common creator.
Common creator, all-loving father, endlessness. And goes on and on about this, and you think, well, is he such a rosy fellow as Gurdjieff makes out? I don't know. His endlessness seems to be a little limited in some respects.
Well, he must be if he can see that time is eating up his place.
Yeah. Well, yes, you're right. There's the fundamental kind of duality thrown in at the beginning. And one can know, as articles in all cosmological schemes is never the resolvable things. You have to find some literary device who said, how do we get from oneness to all the differentiation of the world? You've got to throw it in somehow, get it in somehow. And what matters is how smart you are in cooking something up, The kind of thing in a lot of cultures, like in Africa, is like this spirit gets lonely.
Oh.
So you've got to cook something up. Well, that's one standard explanation. Well, the other is about this dramatic thing about the running down. Because now let's pause and try and say something about such pictures as Gurdjieff is making. You may think it's about, there's this wise guy and he's got access to how the universe was created. And you think, well, hang on. Look. What can he really be talking about? Always in these things, look for, he's talking about us.
Us human beings.
Yeah, our situation. Our world, bloody some Holy Son, absolute somewhere. I don't know. His endlessness. And, well, you just pause and just consider maybe these are kind of like abstractions from the realm of our experience, because how would we know about them otherwise? Is it by some kind of distillation of what we do know? We all faced with the terror of time.
The terror of the situation.
The terror of the situation, terror of time. And that's why people picked up on Gurdjieff the phrase "the war with time," and Bennett picked it up very much because he was an astute follower of Gurdjieff's cosmology, but his cosmology is a way of getting him to understand our actual experience, and it was taken up also with Bennett's pupils, or my pupils, William Sullivan, who wrote about the Incas and their theology about the war with time, and where it was related to astronomical discoveries thousands of years ago, because it was, his facing up with change and the loss of the old order. Now this is a major theme, and I'm so astonished people don't pick up on this. Because why let's talk about the loss of the old order? Because, well, it's like, well, first of all, have a picture of order. You mentioned order earlier, but the different moments of order, different styles of order, is not always the same. And so Bennett had the idea that there were these epochs, and there was a kind of global mind order for about 2,500 years or whatever it was, and then a shift into another kind of order. This is part of the fabric of his dramatic universe, because you're saying, like in the present day, we're into a shift to another kind of global mind from the previous one. And it was echoed, or not echoed, it was actually deeply considered by these marvelous people, Santillana and von Deschamps, in their book Hamlet's Mill, which is about the impact on human life and the discovery of course, the precession of the equinoxes, the way in which the whole cycle, the Earth wobbles on its orbit and changes the alignment of the stars, and it became taken as a change in the very nature of human life, right or wrong. You see, I'm doing what to say, though. They said that what was called the flood It's not to do with water at all, but to do with changes in the orientation of the Earth towards the stars. So what goes below the celestial horizon, as it were, was said to be drowned. So it meant the loss of the old order. And so then come to a new order. As we know very well, betwixt and between, it ain't easy.
Yes, there's a little bit of chaos.
Absolutely. I would say, look, you know, the road system, you improve the road system, you cause havoc by improving it. And the shift is always awful, and it may be something going on now because the old order is gone, the new order is not yet born, so nobody knows what to do. And
some people don't want to let go of the old ways.
That's right.
People don't like change.
And then they're saying, yeah, we also emphasize, of course we don't know what to do in this period. It's not been settled. We know what to do in a settled period. But that's an idea which, you know, it's prevalent in amongst certain circles, so you get the idea that we face it too, that the order of things changes, and you know, to recreate something. So what is it? And so you get two ideas, you see, latent, and this is me just bullshitting around. Latent in Gurdjieff's story is that you make a world, so to speak, you project these, you call it the laws, the modified laws, into the empty space around the sun absolute. It's like you venture into the unknown, and I'm just now talking about this and following the images of my mind. You see, I don't know if it's true or not, but I thought this is nice. I mean, what is this empty space? It's simply the unknown. Mm-hmm. You know, even, you know, Gurdjieff dallies with this bit, you know, whether God isn't all that knowing after all, because there are unforeseenness which happens, and it's the Gurdjieffanical period, a period when God almost had to ask for help, and all these little tantalizing things to do. But I like the idea, you see, of in the unknown, we're entering the unknown, and so what do we do? So we create something. What do we create it on? And it comes from these laws, but they're modified laws.
So there'll be laws that fit this.
Pardon?
There'd be laws that we're trying to fit this unknown. So the laws have to change in some ways.
Yeah, because you know, it's beautiful, and you're just following the consequences. You know, predicting something out where you absolutely don't know what you're doing. Well, in his descriptions, of course, Gurdjieff was assisting his endless, was very wise and knew what he was doing, and it was all about this. Or two kinds of things, which more or less the same things as they. Because when you go into that space, one of the features of it, different from the Sun Absolute, was that there was an outside as well as an inside. You see, again, this introduction, subtle introduction of the difference, outside and inside. Before there wasn't that at all. There was no outside and inside. It was
just void.
Just the void and the absolute, and that was it. But now you get the outside and inside, so you can have something connected with something through something. You know, this sounds a very simple thing to say, something connected with something through something, but previously they were just connected with this thing through something, because this something was something independent, you see. And so this again made life very interesting. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a nice little cozy, you know, you know, to a little circle, and there they were. You know. As we know in life, you know, we get into a kind of struggle and so on, then suddenly appears from left field, and it all goes off in another direction. I used to relate this myself to, as a physicist, to what's called sometimes, and it's tend to be avoided in physics, the three-body problem.
The three-body problem?
Yes. So you can imagine in an empty space, there are three bodies, not two, three. With two, whatever they're doing, set them off, any place, any movement, and you can absolutely predict what they're going to do. With three, you can't.
Because they could interfere with each other.
It's a very interesting exercise to visualize it and follow it through. It's very, very telling. And quite a lot of people refuse to believe it, but mathematical physicists have been trying for years to find, can we find the equations we could, and predict as much. You can't. So I've taken this to heart very much and say, when you get to three, you can't, intrinsically, you can't know what's going to happen next.
And people don't like that.
I know.
They want to be able to guess, or you know.
I remember some woman, you know, her husband was somebody in NASA and so on. I was talking to her. She got absolutely furious with me. Don't you implying my husband doesn't know what he's doing and sending satellites? I have nothing to do with it. Because of course, the little rocket going to the moon and so on, so tiny in respect to the other bodies involved, so that it doesn't matter very much, but in other realms it does, as related to the whole stability of the solar system, which Newton was very much concerned with, which is part of his own religion. But anyway, so that's, I mean, this is being very vague, I know, Debbie, but it's just a sense, you know, what was this alteration? And then it goes in the law of seven is where you get this intersection, you get a process going on, which is then kicked by other processes, intersections, you know, you see all that it is. We're creating this interactive fabric, and then, hey, presto, you know, get this, ostensibly this, what is it, the maintenance of the universe, but could it be more than maintenance? And really Gurdjieff isn't clear about this. There's a lot about various aspects of it, not about this particular thing, because of God's task was how to maintain his dwelling place, the realm of possibilities, to maintain it, maintain his possibilities. So you look at that, and it's lovely talking to you in this context which you set up for me. It's absolutely beautiful now to see, because this is really attracting into our souls, you know, the whole notion of immortality. What the hell is all that about immortality? It's the uttermost in maintenance.
The utter what? The
uttermost in maintenance.
Oh, in maintenance, yes, to be able to live forever.
Live forever, you see. Why do people want to do that? I mean, there's something playing it. And I'll comment here, Debbie, about all this. I mean, taking Gurdjieff's ideas and following through this, which people would do. It doesn't matter to explain Gurdjieff or in a sense or trying to, but just follow up what happens in you as you let these ideas come into you. What happens to you? What you see, what feel, what you evoke, and so on. I'm not interested in sort of, in a sense, in the ordinary sense, understanding what Gurdjieff wrote at all.
So how it works on you, how it affects you.
Yeah.
Do you think many people switch off as soon as they find it too complicated?
Whatever, you know, when it means complicated, it means that they have some effort involved. Why not have bloody effort? What's wrong with you, weaklings?
Well, people want things handed on a plate.
Absolutely. And in the last seminar, we got into this thing about, because I have a long term, and about the word understanding, let's say, where people use this in quite contrary sense to its ostensible meaning. Its ostensible meaning is that you stand under. But what people use it is when they stand over. That is, I understand something means I'm comfortable with it. You know that phrase, American phrase? Mm-hmm. Are you comfortable with this? And they say, oh yeah, I'm comfortable. It means they've gone back to sleep. It's assimilated, and Gurdjieff describes this accurately in Beelzebub's Tales of marvellous parts on the reason of knowing, reason and understanding, which is genius, absolutely amazing. Up means what people call understanding is the opposite. It's overstanding.
Right.
And then I had one member, Morgan, our musician, he came up with this lovely phrase, what about inner standing? So that's my way now. My way is the way of inner standing, because I have to make something about all this stuff out of my own material. My images, my sensations, my feelings. And I'm horrified by people. They kind of alienate themselves from their own material and project into this abstract realm, and then they furrow their brows and write their explanations, and it's pointless because it hasn't engaged their stuff. You see, and Gurdjieff is so astute. In one of his lectures he talks about this work. He said, where does the work have to operate? He says, in your essence. He says, but essence can be lazy and stupid.
It's like a little child, isn't it?
Like a little child, you see. You say, what do you need? You need, the personality, you can't do anything in a personality, because the personality can learn some stuff which can enable them
pass it on to the essence.
Get it into the essence. That's the whole game. He portrays it so brilliantly, you know. You'll say, oh well, let's forget personality in book learning. No!
they both need each other.
Absolutely. But the stuff you see, this essence, what is it? It's what you're born with. You know, it's in your genes, your blood, your guts, your environment, your air, the location. It's all this concrete reality is called, there's even called the life is called in technicality now, the life world. The life world. That's where you've got to do it, because you've got no other material. If this other material is what you call vicarious, second hand, that's no good. So we've got to do this. So we're coming back to these laws, and you see this opportunity of talking to you in this way is so precious, because it's so different from sitting in a chair with a pen. When there's only oneself and it's boring.
So not having the prepared script, but instead being more spontaneous and doing it in the moment.
Doing the moment, but this thing in the moment can become just a cliche, but it's actually because there is this fresh material, so it's like raw meat. I don't know what the metaphor is. It's something. It's got this taste to it, but nothing else has got, and it's also very key to the oral tradition. But imagine it was all based on what could be spoken, not written down at all. Why does that have power, and why Socrates was so concerned about that and hated writing, or he said he hated writing, kind of thing. So as if I had a conclusion made from this. But it's this, now I see this unknown, you see, this is you come from, it's like, I don't know, I just make it up in this point of view, this projection of the laws. He just uses the phrase like, into the surrounding space. And I think, what bloody surrounding space for that? Anyway, it's this emptiness. Later on it becomes etherochrylno, which takes from ether, which is the old word for the fifth element, which combines all the other elements, and was of course demolished in physics in the 19th century. But that's the ether. The ether is a substance making and creation. But just take it as this, we have we're faced, can we identify ourselves with being his endlessness? Why not? Well, because time's running out.
Time's eating us up.
Yeah. And as the Scottish philosopher John Locke put it, time is a perpetual perishing.
Yes.
Tick
tock, tick tock.
Yes, right. It's going out. So I think, you see, this is what makes me like. There's an interesting part of Beelzebub. These parts I try to look at that, and there's various descriptions of the laws and the planets and all of that, and all that endless stuff about the substances and the law of Heptaparapashinok, and you flog away at this. Okay, it's good enough. It's good to flog. Well,
good to flog. It's hard to understand.
But you see, what is your requirement for understanding? This is what I want to bring out, Debbie, in this. With you. Because I still think you pick it up from you, this sense. Understanding means done that, got the t-shirt, been there,
yep.
Now I can go on to something else. Thank you very much. I don't have to bother with that anymore.
So we've got to try to do, what was it you were calling it? Inner standing.
Yeah, inner standing, that's unending.
Pondering on it.
It's unending. There's a lovely book by a man called Cars called Finite and Infinite Games. Have you ever come across it?
I've heard the title. Who was the author again?
Cars, C-A-R-S-E, something Cars, and it's his best book. It's absolutely brilliant. I keep pulling myself to get back to that again. Anyway, the infinite game is the game in which you, the object of the game is in the way the game
is played.
To be played. Play up the game's a thing. It's an old English sentiment. But there's a finite game. It has things like winners and losers, and that's the difference in the infinite game. There are no winners or no losers, and a lot of people would find that abhorrent. It's got no termination. What's the point?
Yes.
And I just take a little time on there, a lovely simple illustration which may be effective for some people, not all people, but it's about this two brothers playing tennis. One is older. Of course, what happens is that the older brother can always return the shot of the younger brother doesn't often able to return the shot. So what's happening is that the older brother is getting bored and the younger brother is getting frustrated. Until somebody got on this, change the rules. See, the usual rules where you should be winning, one should be active and the other person defeated. That's the only game. No, change the game. The object of the game is to keep the ball in the air as long as possible. Then both of them could enjoy the game.
Yes, they would.
You see? I think simple illustrations are not exhaustive, you can pick holes in it, but I thought this is really good. That's the nature of the game.
And it would be more about playing rather than emphasising, like you say, on the winning or the losing.
That's right. Get more interested in your purse, $100,000 or whatever it is.
Because I actually work with footballers at the weekends, and I try, especially with the children, to say to them, enjoy the game. It's not about the winning.
Absolutely.
Just go and play.
You get any luck with doing that?
Some do, some understand, but it seems to be as they get older, it's more important about winning.
Yeah.
And it's like, does that become an adult thing? You've got to be winners.
Again, it's so dominant in America, this, you're a loser, only the first decision has a meaning, and it's just this.
And it becomes people judge you by whether you win or lose at things,
right.
And that's a shame, because it should be, as you say,
and
taking part.
To have a game, you've got to have losers, so let's respect them.
Yes.
And the graceful loser, all these sentiments which were around in the way traditionally is now wiped out, there's not any American influence, but all that attitude of mine.
It kind of reminds me of Eddie the Eagle, because he used to just do his skiing because he just enjoyed it and had fun. He knew he was never going to win, but he still had fun, didn't he?
Absolutely.
And that's how it should be. Go and enjoy whatever you're doing in life, whether it's a game, work, whatever. Do it because you want to do it and get something out of it. You don't have to win, do you? You just have to partake and enjoy it.
Partake, you see, that's a very good reminder for me in this, that's the only thing we do is to participate. You see, because there's everything we possibly happen can do is there in the world. You see, in reality it's there going on. All we can do is participate in it. We can't kind of make it up or do something different or what's happening anyway. So, well, it's just, there is football, there is music, and many things which people have not thought of yet or recognized as such. But you find something you can join into. Now that side of things is, I think, very much a kind of promise of the new age emerging. Even though it seems to be such a frail and hardly known thing. But in Gurdjieff misses a lot of this because there's still this sort of emphasis on isolated achievement, in spite of but he's magnificent in some respects, because I always took a lot of appreciation of his brotherhoods and his societies like Acheldan. I love this whole account. I think Acheldan was founded by Belkoltasi, and he's this, I've forgotten what region he was and what period, but he just began to suspect there was something not quite right with him. And it was so vivid for me, so amazing. Even like talking to him, that suddenly goes, something in my mind goes, and then he said, and it's like, you suddenly realize it's something like it's a fake. It's not reality, it's a fake, it's something, and he talks to his friends about this, and they look into it, and then get together, and they go, it was so, for me, so inspiring.
But he had to go through all that. Belkoltasi, I never remember how to say his name. Belkoltasi. He had to go through all that to develop what he'd been pondering and learning, and then to come to the realisation that it's not the be-all or end-all of what he'd learnt, was it? He realised, like you say, there was something missing, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it.
Yeah.
But he knew it wasn't right.
It wasn't right, so he started, as a genuine, what Gurdjieff was after, a sort of research. It doesn't have to have a terminus. I've forgotten what the end of the story was, Acheldan. it just something was there where people were then open to investigating in this way, and that should, well, what we should, should when it comes in, should have been what the fourth way was all about. Instead, it's become just a thing of a copying some practice or other someone's invented, that has nothing to do with the reality, which is this tremendous appeal to what you can suss out yourself and open this door.
Well, Gurdjieff was very on about pondering, didn't he?
Pondering. Yeah.
Think about what we're doing. Don't just believe me, but verify for yourselves.
And that's another thing, pondering, because one thing is what he called weighing thoughts. The thoughts have weight. It's what is it? Because it means you, even if it's just a metaphor, to take it. I think certain ideas you've got feel them as beings or substances, and feel them in their weight and their substantiality. That's all I can say. Their substantiality, and when you do that, you're into this being world, and that's where and we don't like him, but Bennett was very keen to say there's another dimension, which is the idea of being, which is not like knowledge at all. And that's where you can ponder, because you can weigh thoughts. That's the being world. And what are the thoughts? That's a totally different approach. It's more connected with the understanding. You see, if you have an idea, and people it's like it's dashing around like a monkey, kind of thing, Mercury with idea. You just let it dwell. And
develop inside.
And develops inside, and it's just beautiful. Honestly, Debbie, it's really, as I've been doing with you, give me this opportunity. And in fact, you're not saying very much. In fact, you're absolutely critical to what's happening here. That you provide this container, this vessel. There's something can come out there, and where these things can unfold, because you're not you need the unfolding, but the containment, and it's quite an art. And it's, for me, crucial for all the realm of true understanding, the Gurdjieff work and all the rest of it, but it's not because people are losing themselves in their thoughts. And yeah, I agree with people who try to defense against thoughts. Yeah, people say thinking is bad. As you know, thinking is bad. It's not real thinking at all. And Gurdjieff provides lots of hints for people who haven't taken, like his insistence on mental images, which Bennett picked up when he referred in certain exercises to the thinking center. He said, this is to do with mental images, and most people would not take the thinking center to do with images at all.
Because they couldn't relate it, maybe?
Well, they couldn't relate it. How does having an image relate to think? Because thinking with them is this activity, buzzing around and calculating and manipulating and so on. And holding a mental image, why? Because that's thinking in the realm of being. You see, is dealing with what is, whereas the only realm of thought is becoming something else. You know what I mean? So leading on to something else. That's why people get disorganized by thinking. They can't stay with anything. And so-called thinking of people is so they don't actually stay with anything and trying to get to something better. Now all that stuff is so useful, and the other people like Krishnamurti and David Bohm and their conversations about thinking and so on are absolutely brilliant and outstanding. Really amazing. And you see in Steiner you get this completely called a clairvoyant vision, which is really his version of this, because he's seeing things clairvoyantly, but forget the clairvoyance of the way, it's just this bearing, having this vision, this inner vision. This is what it is. Now,
so how can we lead this back to Zoroastrianism?
Well, we just have to leave Zoroastrianism behind. It's very good to
have started on that was fantastic.
To appreciate
yes.
when it was still recognized in the time of Islam. And there's this problem because of those catastrophic events in Persia itself. They'd lost the time a lot of their scriptures, and they had to be rewritten at a certain time to be kitab, people of the book, and be accepted by Islam. Anyway, but he was, and some people have said that because of guessing that Ashiata Shirmash represented Zoroaster.
Yes, he's one of my favourite characters, and many people's Ashiata Shirmash. Ashiata Shirmash.
Yes, thank you very much. And get it right. He came to me because of it appeared to say, and it may be too crude for some people, this kind of picture of it, that all he did with people was just talk with them. And elicited, from them this sense of conscience. I thought this was great. Just no miracles, no special powers. Yes. I thought
no preaching.
No preaching. Amen.
Yes, praise be to that.
Yeah. And it was just, and it's this, because there is that thread in Gurdjieff who makes a meal out of it sometimes, and I'm so serious about this renunciation of powers. We should never use powers. Because I've tasted it a bit in my own life. I actually saw, could do things, but no, don't ever do that. You can, there are ways of influencing people, invoking experiences and so on, but don't do it. Yes, I think. And this, because it's in a way dehumanizing. You operate on somebody with a power, it just really is. Well, that's the Aleister Crowley kind of end of things, the black magic. That is black magic, using these powers to affect people. So,
because you don't want to be superior if you're teaching people, or not teach, or helping people. You want to try to be equal with them.
Well, yes, that's the big thing. Big thing is equality, not difference. And it's lovely. Well, it's a creative play. I just think those short stories about the sheikh and his pupil, and how the pupil wanted to really serve the sheikh and so on. The sheikh kept twisting it around, so always the sheikh was the person of serving the pupil. Whatever the pupil came up with, let's try this, let's try that. No, it would always be like that. And it's such a rich. Another thing, David, I find about people, you talk about people, they're imaginary beings called people. There's so much ignorance around nowadays. You see these amazing. You don't appreciate the stories. I was thinking the wonderful. You know the novels of Hermann Hesse?
I've never read them.
Oh,
sorry.
You cut me to the quick. There's one Journey to the East. It's a group of people making this journey. Some of them are actually people like Paul Klee, the painter. And there's a very short story, but then it turns out the person who looked after the servant of it, Leo, was actually the master, which they only realized in the end. And it's only 90 pages. You could spend
look it up. Okay, then. It sounds good.
You look at it.
Sounds like a take on Monkey, Journey to the West.
No, it's But I think it's an example, what do we do? I mean, we've got limited time, we can do something like his book Steppenwolf, which is about many eyes in the most extraordinary way, and this Siddhartha about the Buddha. I mean, it may be generational. For my generation, that was influenced by people like Colin Wilson and so on, appreciation of these visionaries, and they've faded out. But it's a shame because they provided this narrative material, these stories, which in a sense you need. I remember Gurdjieff in Meeting Remarkable Men, in the context of his father, who was a bard, Ashok, saying he regretted not taking more notice of traditional myths and stories, which he saw there's so much in it. And in modern age, people like Idris Shah began to wrote these stories, these teaching stories, I've gone back to recently, and I think the most extraordinary. I don't know why people don't use these, just neglect them. And this is a way of which, and he did collections of world stories and so on, and this story material, and the horror thing happening now in schools now, and parents not letting their children learn fairy stories because they're not true.
And also because they say they're too violent.
They're too violent.
But
kids love violence.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. Kids do love the gore, they love the horror, they love being scared because they're still willing to go through those emotions.
And you know about that, Debbie? I read a study once, I can't quote the source, and the guy looked into what were the most long enduring, I think, fairy stories. They said they're those ones which contain something really nasty. They're the ones you remember. And why is it? Because my friend Matthias says, in terms of the imagery and so on, you probably don't get very far nice images. There's something a bit perverted in it that enables you to remember. And so there's a very deep psychology in all of this. You see.
There's a lesson to learn in it, isn't there?
Absolutely. So this, and you see, power of Gurdjieff, because he was full of comments about the crocodile's cunt and shit from the donkey and all this kind of stuff. And why was he doing it? Not because he was a rude man, well, he probably was that as well, but it was just this, because he knew.
It makes things happen, doesn't it? If you hear it like that,
like that, And I've tutted and why are people attracted to any road accident and so on. And it's just, you think this is a low character, it's bad, something bad, but it's not. It's just this empirical psychology, what gets to you. And if there isn't something like this, you don't really remember. This is why. Not why, when I say this is why it's a lie, I'm just adding it because I just thought of it. I'm really getting a bit back into Shakespeare. I know why Shakespeare featured in my last seminar, because his way is now taken to be a certain number of people take Shakespeare as the greatest thinker in England there's ever been thinker. And also a book by a man called Bloom on how, in a way, that he claimed that Shakespeare created the modern human individual.
Oh, by letting them have their story.
Well, no, he actually created this. You look at these great characters, Macbeth and Hamlet, Lear, Othello. All this was about creating a vision of the human individual which really hadn't been there before. This is the claim. You need to believe in it, and it's haunted me for a long time, because when I was first at Coombe Springs, they had various books in there. At the time, Subud was around, and they were about threatening to ban Beelzebub. And one was Beryl Podgson. She was with Maurice Nicole. He wrote this book, In the East My Pleasure Lies, which was a study of Shakespeare. I never got around to reading her book, but it haunted me. And Bennett used to say about Shakespeare that he really understood what, in his system, called the divided self, which is actually the deep-rooted consciousness in people's self. And so glad on this episode of getting into contact myself with there. And you see, as an Englishman, you see, and I heard stories from, I know, Liswell perhaps, I've never tested them out, seen often how Gurdjieff detested Shakespeare, you see. And I think, well, more foolish Gurdjieff. This is to do with the nature of his poetry. But these incredible people who are, you get people interested in Gurdjieff and they become narrow. They shut down into this funnel vision. It's awful, Where's Goethe? Where's Shakespeare?
Why do you think Gurdjieff didn't like Shakespeare then?
Well, it was to do, I believe, and because I haven't verified this, I believe it was to do with nature of poetry, because Shakespeare broke with the Elizabethan time was incredible in literature, and you had Spenser, he wrote the Fairy Queen.
Yeah.
And we tested this because with Bennett, you say, let's test this, and we had actually went and heard somebody read the whole thing. The whole thing, the Fairy Queen, is all based on images. This, and it's not just doing pictures. It's embedded in images. It's actually very intense. And of course, in Shakespeare's sonnets, almost like no images. There's absolutely how to say it? It's like super laws. I don't know how to express it. It's so extraordinary. And it has elements in it, as the scholars do it afterwards, where in the original photos you can see even the shape of the letters signified and the meaning of the sonnet, and how the play on words was paramount to normally would despise the play on words, when notation by word. Like there's one sonnet, this use of the word will in 7 different ways in the same sonnet. Yeah. All this kind of thing. And he said, no, he wanted, because Gurdjieff was based on this tradition of images, and he hints at this in these enigmatic statements in Meetings of Remarkable Men, where he said, I now go on to this method of narrative which involves, and I can't remember the exact phrase, but he obviously, ostensibly, is in on how you create this flow of images and that can carry something. And he's right, and I want to get a connection with that with my friend Matthias about this. Whereas it's known in all real storytellers, and they actually draw on a flow of images, and it's like their own movie to do it. So that's what you see. Gurdjieff, and it pisses me off in all respects. He's total. I'm sure, in spite of what people like the late Keith Bozell said, he didn't understand it and have a clue about modern science. Always remarks about modern science are crap as far as I can see. He really misses the point. It's quite destructive in what he says. In a way, like he's also, I think, quite destructive about women. And this must be acknowledged. He's an incredible man in his own right, but he's, there's certain elements you want to say, I don't want to go along with you this path, Mr. Gurdjieff, I might then kind of thing. Because I remember this, I won't say his name, but at one of the conferences at All and Everything, somebody gave this lecture about objective science, and I was appalled. I tried to interrupt him twice, and then the people running the session prevented me from saying anything more, because he produced this abysmal rendering of modern science, the quantum mechanics and relativity. He didn't know what he was talking about, and he had all these diagrams from the books which he didn't understand a thing of. You can tell he went whittering on about Gurdjieff's objective science and how poor modern science was. I just wanted to smack his head in. He was a total moron and twit,
But isn't he allowed his idea of what he thinks Gurdjieff's work is, or do you think he got it completely wrong, so it just shouldn't be spoken?
Well, I wanted, I used to want to get up and shout at him, and I wasn't allowed to, so I was upset. That's what I wanted to say. You piss off, I wanted to throw ripe tomatoes at him. I don't care,
Because that is the problem with Gurdjieff not being around today. We've got all and everybody trying to decide what he was trying to say.
Well, what does one do? And one has one's own measure. I mean, it's kind of the hidden side of Bennett's wonderful saying, integration without rejection. I say I'm really devoted to that principle, but I always say, but.
They should have let you speak. We should all be allowed to say what we feel if something's, as long as it doesn't turn into a major fight or an argument, and that you are lurching across the room to kick his head in.
Well, you see, Gurdjieff said two things. Of course, the master about this once he say, to understand is to agree.
Yes.
Then when he said, truth comes out of argument. You see.
So you can have healthy debate.
Yeah, you can have some argument in it. But still people got this addiction. I know really personally, I just say, I hate this point of view, and I'm going to argue as much as I can. There's a guy who runs a department in the V&A. Saw him with Fires a few years ago, and he gave me a talk at that. I think he was at that.
Yeah, John Smith, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, I should mention his
name. Sorry.
On this
yeah.
thing. But, and I took him to task about all of this, and he said, no, because he's got this belief. It's the belief in this ancient science and so on. Now, this belief in ancient science had at one time a very creative result, but it's with a lot of provisos, namely, you go, great people like Newton, he was into all sorts of things, but he was into the occult history, alchemy, particularly in this notion, because there are books around from the Hermetica and so on, but some trend came out about Chaldean science, Chalden, which is around Babylon and so on. Because there's a lot of things hanging around there, even things like Enoch studied astronomy in Britain, and Noah was an astronomer, and all this kind of stuff floating around. Anyway, he was steeped in this idea about an ancient science, and he was aware of these amazing stuff, the pyramids to some extent. He was interested, knew about them, and there's something in the past there which had got lost. What did he do? Well, and there is also, and I must add in this because I tell everybody as much as possible, his name is, I call it something Jones, an American science fiction writer. I don't think it is Jones, but I can't remember his name. And it was a beautiful story about creativity and belief. And it was where physicists got contacted by governmental authorities. Say, we want to invite you to take part in the project. Oh, what is it? We can't tell you. We're going to meet in this house, in this place, with various people, and we'll present to you what the task is. They read people, knew some of them, didn't know others, all kinds of disciplines, and they said, well, the situation is this. This chap here, so-and-so, who had an accident in his laboratory and died, appears to have invented anti-gravity. And all he got left is the bits of mangled machinery, some notes, his library. But if this chap has done it, it must be possible. So over to you, chaps. So, person in the story goes to take part in it. And they look at the notes are like gibberish, the bits of remaining apparatus incomprehensible. This library is full of occult stuff. It's beautiful, otherwise.
So science and esotericism.
Well, yeah, everything. It was just a chaos, a mixture of things, you see. And this chap goes and struggles away because he kept on going, this chap has done it, so it must be possible. This chap has done it, it must be possible. So he's then watching eddies, and then he comes out. So he invents an anti-gravity machine, which is not like the one proposed. It's extremely heavy, goes 2 inches above the ground, but it's an anti-gravity machine. Then of course they tell him there was no such man.
Oh.
But people wouldn't have made the effort to do so unless they believed it was possible.
Yes.
It was the 3-minute or 4-minute marathon, which was it 3 minutes or 4-minute mile of Bannister?
Yes.
3 or 4 minutes?
4 minutes, I think.
4 minutes, whatever it was. And you see, people didn't believe it was possible. Then he did, and people started doing it all the time.
Yeah.
And so there's a power here. So back to things about Gurdjieff's ideas and so on. But what I find these people doing is knocking modern science, which they're probably not really versed in. And they're missing all the incredible stuff in modern science and mathematics, just missing it out of hand. And not doing anything themselves at all. So just adhering to an image of belief. And I think that's disgraceful. It was like Feynman, the American physicist, would say he gets all sorts of wacky ideas about the universe. He says, that's fair enough, I don't mind wacky ideas. But none of these people put the work in to justify their idea. They don't come up there and put graft. He said, I'm a scientist, you've got to put the work in.
Yes.
Don't matter what the idea is, I'm open to anything. The universe can be made of blue cheese, but find out.
Yeah.
So there's that, and then we're coming to a close. You want to looking into a watch here and so on. But we've got to the threshold, you see, of these laws, and there's whole idea of laws in Gurdjieff is problematic because again, when you come across anybody going into etymology of this, and it's also in our English word laws and so on, because it has this twofold connotation which change. Laws, civic law, the social law, so to speak, and it's very much by Roman ideas. You see, but then how it came into laws of nature. I still haven't sussed out. I want to find out more about how it became laws of nature, because you get then a source of major confusion. And because a law in life is dependent on authority, like a parliament or a dictator or whatever it is who sets the law. Other people obey the laws that are to be obeyed, and they project this idea on natural law.
So who's the authority in natural law?
That's right, and you've got this endlessness, or wherever the creator God is, you happen to fancy, kind of thing. But it's ridiculous. In Islam, there's a lovely phrase: "The laws of nature are the habits of Allah."
That's a good one. I like that. Yeah.
And the philosopher Charles Sanders Peirce said it's what he calls threeness. It's like the natural laws evolve, and that's much more a modern idea of emergence. There isn't a kind of diktat of here is the law, It's the universe. Now you, universe, obey this law. And this is prapidocious. I mean, this is, there's this other way where it's kind of more interesting to me anyway. It's emergent. But you see, going back to Gurdjieff and what's happened with his teaching and so on, there's been this, I call it this right-wing authoritarian factor in it, which comes from perpetuating, even though it's very radically challenged in many ways, perpetuating this top-down view of the universe, which there's some kind of divine authority somewhere, which we can be privy to because we've read Gurdjieff. I think, oh no, if you ever start thinking that way, go and cut your head off. I mean, really, it is not on at all. So I find a way to get to this inner standing, how to come to these things. You see, there's elements, called imagery and sensations and feelings and all this wonderful riches. So it makes me despair people when they go to these groups and they chat about themselves and observing themselves. I don't know who they are, what they think they are, and there's nothing about the actual stuff and this incredible organism and what has come out and how all of terrestrial evolution is in this body, and there's no appreciation of this because people want this external authority which they can buy into and become therefore elevated above other people.
But isn't that their ego, isn't it?
Yes,
being fed
ego
and going,
yeah,
I'm enjoying this, so it wants to work on it.
That's
or
right.
show off and then inflate itself.
I was mindful then of the story. I think it could have been there's another Krishnamurti who was a total skeptic. He's a very interesting man.
But he was after the theosophical Krishnamurti, wasn't he?
No, I'm talking about the other Krishnamurti, not that one.
Right.
There's another Krishnamurti, entirely different. And he was skeptic. He talks about the scene. You get these hierarchical groups, like the Foundation, and you think, that was the thing with the pyramid thing, like pyramid selling. You work your way through the ranks. You try to get to the top. You see, and notice at each stage you get the sense where you've shown something more than you were at the previous stage, and that's the kind of incentive, like in the Foundation. So you're allowed to come to a movers class. You get attend for so many years at so and so. You get to another thing. But in this cynical picture, it says you get to the the top. What is there at the top? The ultimate truth, insight. Because the chap gets to the top and finds there isn't anything.
How disappointing.
What's he going to do then? And he has a choice. Carries on perpetuating the scam,
or reveals,
or splits in it in the way Krishnamurti, otherwise, sort of split from it. I said, no, then staying inside of it. You see, but you could feel the dilemma of this person getting there. And if you look around, and in a way it's all a contract. Because why? And it's diabolical because it's based on withholding information from people in the name of superior status. I am higher than you, I can see more than you, you are not yet worthy of what I have. And if you pay me some more money, or just sweat on my behalf, then you might get another tidbit. This is such straightforward, diabolical practice. People aren't, because you still got this residue of believing the authorities. Like we had here in this place, the gallery, which was once a Victorian school. And I don't know if you ever went to the club room, and it's painted out now, but they had a mantelpiece with a nice fire, and they had engraved on the stonework there, obey those who have authority over you.
Oh, I've always been a rebel, so I would have not liked that.
No, but you see, that's still going on. That's still going on. And so Mr. God, they're turning Mr. God into a tyrant, a dictator and all this sort of thing. So this all comes around to this portrayal, this Holy Son Absolute and his endlessness, rejecting it. And then this takes you through this extraordinary process of how was this interlacing, interweaving of having these semi-autonomous elements, you know, because it's all enabling the maintenance of something. But he doesn't. There are other ways of looking at things, including a man called Scotus Erigena in the 6th century AD, a Christian, remarkable man, and he's talking about, he had really got play with this idea of creation. He said there is the created and the uncreated, there is the created creating, and all in as he ended up, and I can't do it accurately here enough from my memory about the 4 states, but there is the this idea of some kind of idea like the created creating, but creating, you see, in Gurdjieff talked about world creation, world maintenance, but the world itself capable of creating, and that was the sense he associated with the Holy Ghost. And the Holy Ghost to me is very interesting because it given the character role of perfecting. So the Father is creating, the Son is redeeming, and the Holy Ghost is perfecting. And it's the perfecting of the existential real world, you and I. And we're all in that game. You know, not asked to be anything but what you are. But
it's like an ongoing development.
Yeah, do it better. Because then, and there's lovely images, and I become, you know, what they call a true individual, and then you become like a bead on the necklace of God. And again, Gurdjieff plays with this, you know. What's the end? Originally, all the special individuals get to the Holy Son Absolute and dwell on there. Now, in this period, they're not getting there. They're just looking at it and longing from purgatory and getting upset. You know, we're not there, we're the one, you know, we're united with God and so on. I'm just thinking of just flashing the wrong association, but you know, in the Sistine Chapel, the creation of you know, Adam and Eve, you know, and you got God there with his angels, but also with Eve tucked under his arm, and this kind of thing. So that's God and the Holy Son Absolute, you see, with all the other beings. Because, of course, in Gurdjieff, Zenus is dwelling there with his cherubim and seraphim. He's got a mob round him, and they're administrating the universe, you know. And then there's the side which is marginalized later on. You see, so what the hell is all this entourage he's got around him and all that?
So he needs the workers.
Yeah, well then the workers, and now we're on to a whole other thing from the Mesopotamian realm, which is outstanding. I mean, this, which Gurdjieff implied his father was to the Sumerians, the great Sumerians, and the Enuma Elish were on high, and the idea there of the Anunnaki, gods of Sumeria, they had the job of looking after the universe, and so they got fed up with this. So what do? They created man, partly from the earth and partly from the blood of Kingu, who was the consort of Tiamat. Tiamat, the original principle who they had divided in two to make heaven and earth, making man.
So we can do his work.
Yeah, so
his work.
Our worship, you so relieve the Anunnaki of their job. And I think this is outstanding, because we're just dogs' bodies.
Yeah, we're just slaves.
Well, Calvin is a powerful thing. That's a background to all of Gurdjieff's ideas, and why bother with it? Because then you say which is right, which is wrong, true, false, and in other words, but just I see as why I use that term for my book, gymnasium. Just this is gymnasium, just work up a sweat. Well, get into it, you know, because you can get an acceleration for working.
Yeah, get the blood pumping.
Blood pumping, yeah. What is this blood pumping? God bless him, Gurdjieff was so physical, you know, not conceptual, it's physical. And so it's the blood of the body, Hamblitzer, and the blood of the spirit body, of the second body.
Because the life force is in the blood.
Yeah, all our prana, and this is to be celebrated, and so on. So maybe we have to leave it there, but then what happens? What was this magic of this turning around? Maybe I'll try and finish with one, which again won't be too detailed or coherent, but this comes to the third series where he's talking about how can he remember himself? And he goes, God, O is God, and he goes back to God, and God is, I am in my world like God in his world. You see, and what did God do? God sent away the most precious part of himself.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, it enabled him ... And I believe it was so that in a way Goethe plays again with old traditions. See, what is sent away with himself was, of course, the devil, and Lucifer, but also the most beloved.
So he sent away like twins?
No, not mention twins. I was talking about what if he sent away was Lucifer. Lucifer was one time his favorite son, which is challenge towards the Christ image and so on. But this is so. As I say, I can't do it properly or accurately. But read the third series is in there, then this. I haven't done it yet. Read properly Milton's Paradise Lost, which is all about this role of Lucifer. How Lucifer was the most divine angel and rebelled against what God was doing with men. And all of that, anyway, we don't need to go too much in there. I just mentioned it because it came into my mind all by itself. And that's about all of that. There is all this richness, and like you mentioned, and maybe before we started about Judas and so on, and I was so struck when you look at Gurdjieff's alternative view of Judas to the mainstream, but then you look at somebody like Borges, the Argentinian writer. He has this wonderful thing called Three Versions of Judas, which gives three totally different interpretations again of Judas, you see. But I bet that people who get hooked on Gurdjieff Judas never look at Borges, because Borges, you see, is just a writer. Or Gurdjieff is a holy man.
I would look it up, but
Borges' Three Versions of Judas, it just...
Because I don't remember the bit about Lucifer in the third series, but that is very interesting.
Well, I think I could again be mistaken. If I'm mistaken, I'm mistaken.
I shall find it, yeah.
Well, you find it.
But he sent just Lucifer away, not Lucifer and Jesus, just Lucifer, or the Christ.
It's peculiar in that sense, and I made much of it in that paper on active meditation. But it's just, now it comes, I'm trying to bring it back to, at least to this emanation of the modified laws into the universe. So it is because it's an incredible theme in human culture, the theme of sacrifice. This wonderful thing in the Nordic gods, Odin sacrifices himself to himself on the tree.
To get the knowledge and the wisdom.
I don't know whether it was, that was developed after Christianity or independent of Christianity, because the Norse gods are obscure, but I thought, it blew my mind. Odin sacrifices himself to himself on the tree. Wow!
Because I always read that as he'd sacrificed his ego.
Do you see the concept? For me, I'm mind saying so. The structure of the ego is this concept. What was this notion of the which of course was absolutely epitomized in Christianity, and the whole crucifixion thing, which people these days don't like, because it's all bloody and messy and horrible and all that thing. Let's go and chant and sing bells and do all this nice incense stuff and meditate, and we don't have to bother about all that stuff. That God could actually suffer, for us. I mean, the basic idea is so extraordinary. Gurdjieff bypasses it all. He isn't suffering. He just puts God in this world of having to deal with an insolvable problem. How does he get out of this fix? And so that was his particular act of creative genius, to invent that picture. Because you always got to say, well, why does God bother?
Yeah, I often ask that myself. Why does God bother with any of this? There's got to be a reason. God must have a reason. And
Gurdjieff said, well, because he had a problem. His house was shrinking. I think, okay, because they must have heard, okay, but then you've got to go through all this. And going through this is what counts. But this separation of sacrifice, and I don't know, because I'm very much a coward and weakling, but this my dear late friend over Matchett was in a way a spiritual genius in his own right. He used to say about evolution proceeds by the sacrifice of the most precious.
Say that again. Evolution proceeds
from the sacrifice of the most precious,
yeah,
which is contrary to what people would want to believe in, isn't it? You see, oh, you give away what is most precious. You see, this is, and it is, you know, for me, I know I don't conform to it, but every time I just hear the words, I cringe, actually. I think, because this is like a taste of reality. This is what God does, this is what people do, this is what nature does. It's just, but it's, you can't, because it's completely against ordinary, like today's thinking, which is puerile. You know, sacrifice the most precious. You're an idiot. You know, you just want more. Amplify what's most precious to you. That's the sensible way to do it. Get a plan. You know, get a bank loan, whatever. You know, nothing about it. This has got that twist in it, which is there. You don't proceed by more. You actually advance by less, which is completely counterintuitive. Yeah. But you see, David, thanks for the conversation. It's that reflection on it, because I'm so, as you know, I'm so fascinated in the process, and I think there is a kind of thinking which isn't really like what most people regard thinking as at all. It is it partakes strongly in language and words. Again, Gurdjieff was maestro in use of words, that kind of thing, and in which it doesn't require, it sounds ridiculous and required to be true or false, right or wrong, better or worse, and putting it like that could sound just wishy-washy. You see, so what? You know, where's the punchline? There is a punchline in, or a concern about authenticity. You know, because I found it, you know, in a little way in my life, you know, Debbie, because I've been involved with Bennett in giving lectures, and I still remember one time I gave a talk somewhere in London. Liz was there, and he said, "Well, you look very good and all that, and Susan, but do you believe in it?" And I suddenly thought, "Do I believe in it? You know, I don't."
Do you walk the talk?
Yeah, that kind of thing. And I don't want to perhaps I don't. And I've always had that sort of dilemma. Well, it's the what matters to me, not being this or that, but that's the thing. What is authentic? As I'm talking to you now. What is the truth for me? And it's here. Whereas the truth of it is not by reliance on any authority or mechanism or method or anything like this. It just is being true to oneself. No, it's not quite. I can't quite put my finger on it and give it a name, but it has to be this authenticity. So I became. This goes back to my work I did years and years ago, and I'm just revising it or looking at it lately. When I did research work in the College of Technology with science students and so on, and I got them to actually draw the images they had in mind when they were thinking about physics. It sounds quite modest, but quite revolutionary in some respects, because it had to say, just all you do is you bring out what you're, so to speak, seeing in your mind, and you're just bringing it out. You're not asserting it. You're not justifying it, but you just, this is how it seems to me, and that's a straightforward way of seeing it. This is how it seems to me. And why? Because possibly, I don't know if you've been able to do it, you see, or notice it in yourself. I want to be able to do this with people so that instead of nonsense like telepathy and so on, you can speak of something, and when I'm speaking of something, it's actually evolving in front of me, so to speak. It is actually there. And I'm interested in what's there, not what's in me towards you or to anybody else, not from and to, because it's simply there. And so it doesn't require, or you may want to, but that's your choice, agreement or disagreement at all. It just or requires this participation. There is this. I'm running on to another thing, and I say I wouldn't have to start to stop me. And there's a lovely game done by this extraordinary physicist, Archibald Wheeler. He's an American physicist, a really, really extraordinary genius. He died about the age of 101 or something, but he invented a game, a quantum game, and I've only tried it once or twice, about once perhaps, and then very difficult to do in a way. It's like 20 questions. What you do, I may have described it to you before, where you have a group of people, not too many, until a dozen or something, and one person starts, and when they start by bringing to mind an object, that's all. Then one of the other people asks them a question, is it, I don't know, is it artificial? And the person answers yes or no.
But can only answer yes or no?
Yeah, only yes or no.
Right.
Now the person, when asks the question, takes that limited information he's had and finds an image which corresponds to an object which fits the previous answer, and he has the image. Then another person says, is it larger than a human being? And they said, no. See? Then that person creates an image which accommodates these two answers. And it goes on until everybody in the room sees the same object.
Wow, that could take forever.
Well, no, I've done it and it doesn't take forever.
Oh, so he's okay.
Yeah, but what's interesting about it, he said, there's an object there which doesn't exist before, but everybody has made it. And so it's quite extraordinary exercise. I wanted a chance, because like so many things I love to do require this time and patience and working through and being able to have the space to explore it. And I actually did this in Massachusetts at the Camp Caravan, and remember the end object was a computer chip, casino chip, and that was the end object. I was very dim at the end getting it. But this is beautiful, you see, because this is what it's about. It's something which is there. And for me, because this is the empirical sidewall stuff about the inner world and so on, I'm really hip with the inner world, yeah, but it's tangible. And it's not in a sense it's in me or in you. It's like being in me is pathetic. It's there. But it has to be approached in this way, and that's what I always find with people having good conversation, that there's a sense, deluded or not, that we're actually looking at the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And in only discourse, people never pause to even consider, are we actually looking at the same thing? Because they're going off their subjective associations with the words.
Mm.
But it's there. So now I've got this kind of weird, if I try to paint it, it'll look absolutely stupid. It's unabsolute and the nothingness and the laws and all that stuff. It's all a weird little picture. But it's there. And of course this is just the sort of thing that say Einstein did when he developed relativity. It's like that arsehole who gave the talk about objective science did have no idea about relativity or where it came from. And what was Einstein doing? He was being a light ray, traveling. He was in that world, and all this wonderful world of a lot of scientists empirically come to this. Like Bohm himself, he could live in what's called plasma and experience it in himself. And this never comes in the papers, never comes into popular science at all. This power, which is the same as Blakean imagination. It's being, it's the being thinking, it's entering into these things, and when you do that, you always make a profit. You don't have any right answers.
No, that's it.
But it's a ball.
Yes, it's the taking part, it's the experiencing.
So, God bless Zarathustra.
Yes, indeed. God bless Zarathustra and all the others.
Also sprach Zarathustra, and we ought to have the music of Strauss.
playing as we fade out. I should see if I can do that and not get us done for copyright with YouTube's new rules about
God, it's just getting terrible.
whether it be allowed. But if I can, I'll do it. Or maybe we'll have to hum it.
There's why there's the latest trivia game or something, because I realised this whole stream of. I was talking to my friend Carol yesterday about all this, about movies and the esoteric nature of movies. So we've done this sort of alchemical study of 2001. And it's bound to have been there, but I was so surprised to come across it. So we're living in a world where, truly, of all and everything, not just Gurdjieff's all and everything, but his was just an introduction. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you, Tony. That was marvellous. And I'm looking forward to doing more of these.
Oh, lovely. What an opportunity, because you can trust me enough to just allow me to indulge in this way, going, because you've got to have this confidence. I'm so happy to have this touchstone, this being experience. Gurdjieff talking in his book a lot about being logic, being this, being that. And it's just that being stuff of Gurdjieff. Now of course, and you get accept no substitutes.
That's right.
But
what we usually end on is you just quickly tell me about your website for people who want to come to your courses or workshops or what's on in the future.
I'd love to see you, absolutely.
Go and name it and say where people can find your website.
Okay, my website is under the name of Duality, and I was explaining where Duality is chosen for many reasons, but especially for the fact that nobody else would use it. So it's quite protected. It's Duversity, Duversity or Duversity. Du partly coming from Bennett's Dramatic Universe. And so it's www.duversity.org, and there you can find that. I haven't got quite up to date in announcing the seminars next year, but there are 2 main events next year, maybe 3. And the one is, I want to follow up on this year's seminar on gesture, which is based in a way on Gurdjieff's movements, but not restricted to it, like our conversation, restricted to it. I want to get at the meaning of gesture, both secular and spiritual, and prayer, and so on, and also as a way in which, a very intrinsic and powerful way in which we can communicate with ourselves, and I think it only truly can be done through gesture. But I'm going to incorporate it in that elements I'm evidently taken from Bennett about sacred images. His discourses on sacred images were so powerful, and this relates to something very important which I would only be able to hint at because that's far beyond me, but important to remember that his intrinsic task, which I'm not sure whether he fulfilled in his life, was to create a new form of worship which people of today could practice. And as far as we know, he is associated with the creation of a new sacred image, which in a way may be happening already, and was located in what he called unconditional nature. There is a way in which toward the end of his life he got, and I think I briefly mentioned it, I'm not sure, in our conversation just now, in a place he said where we have been disillusioned about both God and Mammon. And what is that? So this is this third path, what is this? And he's done it in the sense of sacred nature. That's one thing. Then in Nashville at the end of the year, in October and thereabouts, the session like this year was around the Brave New World image, which brought up Shakespeare and things like the biosphere experiment and many other things. So they got the theme of the Ark of Noah, and mainstream traditional element will be this time William Blake as the last one.
Oh, one of my
Shakespeare.
favourites.
Oh,
Good
yeah.
old William Blake.
Oh, who cannot love the William Blake? And so I'm going to take that theme, but I've also, as in my events, trying to bring in other things that I mean, and if I'm going to put it like this, the thermodynamics of spiritual practice. I want to bring physics, because I was again almost admire of Bennett, and sometimes as critical. I was admiring his wonderful book Energies, this span from thermodynamics to the divine operations of the Eastern Church, all in one scheme. It still blows my mind. But he had something, because he understood thermodynamics, which brings us back over to the theme of our talk, the merciless Hieropaths and entropy. This is something so deep. And also I must add that in terms of physics, you see, most people don't realize that there are these major things everybody knows about, like relativity and quantum mechanics and the problem of their resolution. But the queen of them all, the major one of them all, is the 19th century, has got the laws of thermodynamics. Now these, some scientists say these are the really ultimate laws, or the laws of thermodynamics. And that's better. So people don't know about, though it's usually fine, people know about 2, but not 3. And you add the 3 and everything changes. So that's that. So all of that, then a nice little enterprise we're going to do next year, possibly in September, where we're going to have a jolly event in Costa Rica, in these sort of times, where we're going to be more exploring theatre, and hopefully by that time we have developed with my friend Josiah James a workshop on enacting the first chapter of Beelzebub, the arousing of thought. By then we'll have something online, so we can, even with an unprepared audience, begin to do something with it, so that people can experience it and just plod through the reading of it, kind of thing. And anyway, there's lots of material on our website, incredible amounts of material, background and documents and references and links and all the rest of it. So please take part in that.
Well, thank you, Tony, and thank you everybody for listening. And make sure that you have fun and play lots of games.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Again.